Namaste, my name is Janapati Das, and we are going to read some more Krishna book stories tonight. And so please let me offer my respects to all of you who are listening. Thank you very much. If you haven't already, like and subscribe my site, my Facebook page, and feel free to share the stories with your friends. And what we're going to do is we are going to get into some hearing and chanting of Krishna's names right now. So feel free to join along. Shri Advaita Gadadhara Sri Vasudeva Haribol. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So, continuing with our Krishna story, as we had read last time, after Krishna kills King Kamsa, his uncle, there was a reunifying and prayers from Krishna and Balaram to Devaki and Vasudeva. And we were about to get into the story of how Krishna saved the son of their teacher. But we haven't gotten to it yet because we were reading about Krishna and Balaram's reunion with Devaki and Vasudeva. Nanda Maharaj and Yasoda were also living in Mathura because Krishna and Balaram were there, but after some time they wanted to go back to Vrindavan. Krishna and Balaram went before them and very feelingly and affectionately embraced Nanda and Yashoda, and Krishna began to speak as follows. My dear father and mother, although I was born of Vasudeva and Devaki, you have been our real father and mother, because from our very birth and childhood, you raised us with great affection and love. Your affectionate love for us was more than anyone can offer one's own children. You are actually our father and mother because you raised us as your own children at a time when we were just like orphans. For certain reasons, we were rejected by our father and mother, and you protected us. My dear father and mother, I know you will be feeling separation by returning to Vrindavan and leaving us here, but please rest assured that I shall be coming back to Vrindavan just after giving some satisfaction to my real father and mother, Vasudeva and Devaki, my grandfather, and other relatives and family members. Krishna and Balaram satisfied Nanda and Yashoda by sweet words and by presentation of various clothing, ornaments, and properly made utensils. They satisfied them along with their friends and neighbors who had come with them from Vrindavan to Mathura as fully as possible. On account of his excessive parental affection for Balaram and Krishna, Nanda Maharaj felt tears in his eyes, and he embraced them and started with the cowherd men for Vrindavan. After this, Vasudeva had his son initiated by sacred thread as a token of the second birth, which is essential for the higher castes of human society. So Vasudeva and Devaki were actually in a caste of Brahmanas. So Krishna was initiated as a Brahmin. Which is interesting because Nanda Maharaj and Yashoda were also I'm getting a mind blank there. They were not Kshatriyas, but actually in the Vaishya community of cowherders and agriculturalists. So later on, we'll see a story of Shishapala and Shishapala. I'm just going to give you a little bit of foreshadowing. We'll criticize Krishna for not being in any particular caste, which he is indirectly true. It's true because he's not. He's the Supreme Personality of Godhead, so he's beyond castes. Vasudeva called for his family priest and learned Brahmanas, and the sacred thread ceremony of Krishna and Balaram was duly performed. During the ceremony, Vasudeva gave various ornaments in charity to the Brahmanas and endowed them with cows decorated with silken cloths and golden ornaments. Previously, during the birth of Krishna and Balaram, Vasudeva wanted to give cows in charity to the Brahmanas, but being imprisoned by Kamsa, he was able to do so only within his mind. With the death of Kamsa, the actual cows were given to the Brahmanas. Then Balaram and Krishna were duly initiated with the sacred thread ceremony, and they repeated the chanting of the Gayatri Mantra. So when you are initiated into the Brahmana caste, this is a really important point. Although there was, a varnashram system in Vedic times, it was understood truly that actually by one's qualities or tendencies, one fits into a particular caste. Some people are more like a teacher, some people are more warriors or administrators, some people are more like agriculturists or, merchants and some people are much more like laborers, and so they fit fine with that. And actually, in those kind of situations, one would be one who is a devotee of Krishna. It doesn't matter what caste they're really in. But the Brahmanas were, when they were initiated, they were given a sacred thread that they wear around, and they do the Gayatri Mantra. Their spiritual master would give them the Gayatri Mantra, which is a particular mantra that Brahmanas would, it's also the mantra that Lord Brahma was given from Lord Vishnu when he created the universe. The Gayatri Mantra is offered to the disciples after the sacred thread ceremony, and Balaram and Krishna properly discharged the duties of chanting this mantra. Anyone who executes the chanting of this mantra has to abide by certain principles and vows. Although Balaram and Krishna were both transcendental personalities, they strictly followed the regulative principles. So this is seen again and again. Actually, the devotees, and especially Krishna and Lord Chaitanya, they're transcendental personalities. They're the supreme personality of Godhead. They do not need to follow Vedic rules or regulations and have fire sacrifices and all these different Vedic situations, but because they were setting a precedent for humanity at large, they would follow these particular rules and regulations, even though they didn't really need it themselves, because they are the source of all such rules and regulations. But the living entities conditioned in the material world are given particular rules and regulations to follow to help elevate themselves spiritually. In the Kali Yuga, a lot of these rules and regulations are out of date. I mean, not really out of date, but they're not. There's no one qualified to really follow a lot of them because of the sinful propensities of humanity, and we've pretty much thrown a lot of this stuff out the window. So that's why Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came with the sacrifice, yajna sacrifice of this day and age, to engage in the hearing and chanting, that is, of Krishna's names, which is very simple and without all the difficult sacrifices that were previously laid out in the Vedic system. One is not considered to be a perfectly cultured man without being initiated and trained by an acharya. It is said, therefore, that one who has approached an acharya is actually in perfect knowledge, and this is the Vedic system. One has to, just as it says in the Bhagavad Gita, one should just try to learn the truth. This is from chapter 4 in the Bhagavad Gita, verse 34. Just try to learn the truth by approaching a spiritual master. Engage in that with that spiritual master by offering service to that spiritual master and rendering service to that spiritual master. The self-realized soul or the spiritual master can impart knowledge because he has seen the truth. So the spiritual master in our lineage is a perfect disciple who has taken initiation from an acharya, a perfectly realized spiritual master, received the transcendental knowledge of bhakti yoga applied it in their life through sadhana bhakti, and has come to self-realization themselves and being able to also become a spiritual master. So my spiritual master received his initiation from A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, which we're reading from. And A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada received an initiation from Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati, who is a son of Bhaktivinoda Thakur and a scholar, but he also received his initiation from Gaur Kishore Das Babaji. Gaur Kishore Das Babaji received his initiation from Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and this goes on. In the beginning of the Bhagavad Gita, as it is, there is actually a disciplic lineage of all the spiritual masters back to Lord Chaitanya, back all the way to Lord Brahma, because we are the Brahma Sampradaya, one of the four main Sampradaya lineages of Vaishnavas. So we actually need to receive our truth. There's a saying that says, and I'm trying to exactly think, but it's skip my head. As a, like our mind, right? Just always forgetting things. Guru gives us God, right? No, God gives us Guru, and Guru gives us God. That's the saying. Because, if we find ourselves overwhelmed by the material world, and we cry out to Krishna, please, I don't understand this. What I need to know the absolute truth, and then Krishna arranges to have it so that you come into contact with a pure devotee. The pure devotee then teaches you the transcendental knowledge of how you need to apply it and how you can have a relationship with God. You can't, it's, like, and my spiritual master has told me that, a lot of times people just want to reach God without the guru or without the teacher to teach them them. And it's kind of like, if you want to have an audience with the president, you can't just go knock on the door of the White House and say, hey, Mr. President, I want to have a relationship with you. No, you have to meet somebody, or I want to meet with you. You have to know somebody who knows the president so that you can, learn how you approach this person and how you, have that relationship. So similarly, the spiritual master is the person who knows the Supreme Lord because of his relationship with his spiritual master. So this is the Vedic process. This is the pure way of understanding transcendental knowledge. One is not considered to be a perfectly cultured man without being initiated and trained by an acharya. It is said, therefore, that one who has approached an acharya is actually in perfect knowledge. Lord Krishna and Balaram were the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the master of all education and knowledge. There was no need for them to accept a spiritual master or acharya, yet for the instruction of ordinary men, they also accepted a spiritual master for advancement in spiritual knowledge. And once again, Krishna, Balaram, Lord Chaitanya, they always do these things to set a precedent of what is expected of the common man to do. It's why it's said that, what Krishna told Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita, what great men do, common men will follow. He was making this point that if you feel like, even if you are qualified enough to go off to the forest to be a yogi and not fight in this battle of Kurukshetra, then people will look to you and say, oh, well, Arjuna did this. He went off to the forest, so I can go off to the forest. But Krishna was making the point that not everyone is spiritually elevated to do other duties than what they have the capacity of doing. So he made the point that, in karma yoga, you would apply your talents, you would apply your capabilities and what you have in the service of Krishna as an offering to Krishna. And so that was what, in this case here, Krishna and Balaram set the precedent. You should have a spiritual master. So the Supreme Lord actually took on a spiritual master, even though he is the source of all transcendental knowledge. It is customary, after being initiated in the Gayatri Mantra, for one to live away from home for some time under the care of the acharya in order to be trained in spiritual life. Another thing that's very hard to do nowadays. As devotees of Krishna, it's good to try to train your children into spiritual knowledge. Otherwise, they will be influenced by the material world and all of its luxuries of alluring traps of ways of taking you away from Krishna. So traditionally in the Vedic system, there was an ashram of Brahmacari. So as student life, boys and girls would go to school for just boys and girls separate, and they would learn from the acharya or the disciples of acharyas about spiritual life, and of course about material life, but also training, exercise, and basically utilizing all these hormonal activities that are going on as a teenager, where in modern day life people just like, oh, they get boyfriends and girlfriends, how cute, and then people get pregnant, and you have unwanted children and whatnot, or people are confused about their sexual identity, and thinking they're a boy or they're a girl, and they're just influenced by society, which is completely going the wrong way spiritually. But the Chari, or the disciples, would teach them about the absolute truth, so that they have a firm spiritual foundation, so that when they enter into householder life or material life, which enables a householder has certain gratifications that they're allowed, like sex life, gaining possessions and money, because you have to raise a household with a wife and a child or children. So those are considered ashrams. That's why they call it the Varnashram system. You have Brahmacari, and then you have Grihastha. Grihastha is actually the householder life. But without a spiritual foundation as a Brahmacari, you can just be completely blown away in materialistic life as householders. And so in the modern material world, this is how exactly it is done. There, sex life is encouraged, material life is encouraged. Live for yourself and only for yourself, and try to achieve for your own pleasure. There's no focus of God as into the center, and that's the difference. That's why you need an acharya to guide you spiritually. If you come, for me in particular, I was raised as a materialist, and I came to chanting. And so I was able to, change my lifestyle. But, my children are raised this way. And as devotees, this is the right way this is the right way for everyone, not just the devotee. Everyone should be trained this way. And you would actually see less problems in the world, much more peaceful situations, much more less crime, suicide, everything that is related to it. But that's a big topic. I'm getting a little sidetracked on that. Let me just continue here. There are many rules and regulations for Brahmacari living under the care of Acharya. Both Lord Krishna and Balaram strictly follow those regulative principles while living under the instruction of their spiritual master Sandipani Muni in his place in northern India. According to scriptural injunctions, the spiritual master should be respected and be regarded on an equal level with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, because he's an expansion of Krishna. He's also the spiritual master is the representative, like an ambassador of the spiritual of Krishna, and all of all the spiritual masters, his spiritual master, and all the spiritual masters in the lineage. He's a representative. So they should be respected on the same level as Krishna, not as Krishna, but as the representative of Krishna. Both Krishna and Balaram exactly followed those principles with great devotion and underwent the regulations of Brahmacharya, and thus they satisfied their spiritual master and instructed them in Vedic knowledge. So you satisfy your spiritual master, you please your spiritual master. The transcendental knowledge is easily understood. That's the key, because you please your spiritual master, you please the lover of the spiritual master, Sri Krishna, and that's the key, So, as a Brahmachari, or that's for male student, and Brahmacharini, the female student, that time of your life in the body is a really turmoil. What's that? Turbulent time. Your hormones are going crazy, your body's changing, you have a desire for sex enjoyment, and you don't really have any intelligence, really, and your intelligence is still forming. So basically you go by your hormones, and you're trained that way, to just kind of have sex whenever, and that's okay. That's encouraged by society. But in a spiritual life, you actually redirect that energy of sex desire into exercising your body or exercising your mind, refocusing your mind and controlling your mind by chanting Krishna's names and by learning about spiritual life, and that's the training. Just like you go out to the army or go whatever, you're gonna. You have a certain amount of sacrifices that you make, but you become stronger, both physically and mentally, to be able to withstand life's difficult things, or as an army person, you have to go off to fight in war. That's not an easy thing to do. If you were wimpy and you didn't have any training, you'd be immediately killed. So they knew that they have to train them. They have to work them really hard. So with brahmacharis or brahmacharis, it's the same kind of thing. You have to be strong. You have to have a strong mind. You have to be prepared for life as being a very life is very stressful. There's so many ups and downs and challenges we face in life, and what's really happened in this material world as time goes on is that we've kind of turned our youth into just kind of like reflections of materialism, and men are not, there's just a confusion about men and women, and what exactly it is, or men being masculine and having certain kind of roles that are natural to the body of the man, and the female also having relations. That's not to say that okay, all the women need to stay in the kitchen and all the men need to go off to war or something, but we have to understand that this kind of physicality is a normal, natural situation in the material world. And so you have to train yourself according to how nature is set up. And when you try to deviate into that, that's where we get into all kinds of problems as we see today, which I won't go into right now. Let's see, where are we at in time? 27 minutes, okay. So yeah, the brahmacharis are learning to brahmacharis are learning to control and redirect their sexual desires to make them capable. So then when they go into married life, they're able to fulfill that desire if they want to, but they've learned to regulate it as well. Being very satisfied, Sandipani Muni, their spiritual master, instructed them on all the intricacies of Vedic wisdom, as well as in the supplementary literatures such as the Upanishads. Because Krishna and Balaram happened to be Kshatriyas, I thought they were, maybe Vasudeva was a Brahmana and Devaki was a Kshatriya. Yeah, they were specifically trained in military science, politics, and mathematics. So there we go. It's not like you weren't, you're not trained in the material sciences, because you have to operate in the material world. So you do need to know about politics. You do need to know about history and math, and the sciences, relatively. In politics, there are 6 departments of knowledge: how to make peace, how to fight, how to pacify, how to divide, rule, and how to give shelter, etc. All these items were fully explained and instructed to Krishna and Balaram. So they're going to go on to be Kshatriyas, or administrators, right? So they needed to know these things. The ocean is the source of water and river. The cloud is created by the evaporation of ocean water, and the same water is distributed as rain all over the surface of the earth, and then returns towards the ocean and rivers. So Krishna and Balaram, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, are the source of all kinds of knowledge. But because they are playing like ordinary human boys, they set the example so that everyone would receive knowledge from the right source. Thus they agreed to take knowledge from the spiritual master. So all the knowledge does come from Krishna, ability to know and understand things. But Krishna also made it clear about the system, that the Vedic system of how people should follow in the right path. So it's not just like any good thing goes. You can go any path down any which way, and anybody can believe whatever they want to believe, and they're all going to end up at the same source. It's kind of like saying all paths go to the same place. All paths don't go to the same place. It's like saying you're going to go to Tokyo, take a plane to Tokyo from Honolulu. You don't get on a plane that's going to New York City and expect that you're going to end up in Tokyo. You may eventually end up in Tokyo, but you have to eventually get on the right path. Right? You may go the long ways, or you may even go along, you get these flights where you're it's a long, sort of zigzag sort of trip where you have to go down to LA, and then you got to go from Honolulu to LA, and then LA to Seattle, and then Seattle to Philippines or whatever. And so it's sort of a zigzag way, but you eventually end up there. So there are some ways that are longer. There are some ways which are completely not the right way to go, and then there are the very direct way of going, which is bhakti yoga. So this is what Krishna and Balaram are setting up. After hearing only once from the teacher, Krishna and Balaram learned all the arts and sciences. In 64 days and 64 nights, they learned all the necessary arts and sciences that are required in human society. During daytime, they took lessons on a subject from the teacher, and by nightfall, after having heard from the teacher, they were expert in that department of knowledge. So now we're going to learn about everything that they have learned. And I will... This is kind of exciting. I might just leave it off here, and we'll talk about the different things that Krishna and Balaram learned, and then of course we'll get into the story of how, as a payment for their knowledge from the spiritual master will ask them to do something here of getting their son. And I'm not going to get too much into that story because we're going to read it, but you can see that all the kinds of things that you learn as a Brahmacari or Brahmacharini, it's quite a wide field. You know, it's a very wide, diverse field of different sciences, of different arts, covering everything, just like in school. So, you know, oftentimes people think, well, somebody's, you know, spiritually minded, they're not very educated. That's not really true. You know, in spiritual life, you learn not only the material sciences, the arts, the mathematics and politics and so many things that you can learn. You also learn about spiritual knowledge, which is something that is not taught for public school or for, you know, for most kids in a materialistic school setting. They don't learn about, you know, spirits. You know, we live in the United States, we live in a separation of church and state. So any kind of religious studies is actually left out. But you can teach them all kinds of nonsense about, you know, how, you know, it's okay to, you know, if you're feeling like you want to dress up like a girl and you're a boy, then you're really a girl, and it's okay to, you know, or if you're feeling a certain way because of your hormonal changes, you can actually, you know, just go with that, and that's what's taught in the school systems. So, but, you know, spiritual knowledge is the highest form, and everything else is like the jewels or like the ornaments that kind of hang on it. So to know all these other material sciences are very valuable because they become very valuable items to use in relationship to Krishna, in relationship to your service to Krishna. And that's why, you know, we've used this analogy before. When you take an iron rod, the iron rod is just iron, but if you put it in fire, it takes on the qualities of fire. So similarly, anything you use in the material world for the service of Krishna, it could be knowledge, it could be all these knowledges, you could be working in politics, but you're doing it as a service for Krishna, you know, and those kind of things become spiritualized. They help elevate you to this, to go back to Krishna at the end of your life. And this is a Vedic system. This is a system that was originally set in place in the Vedic system to help elevate people out of the material world to go back to Krishna. So that's all for today. We'll read more next time. I'm going to chant a little bit. So thank you very much. Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur, Nitai Gaur, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur, Nitai Gaur, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur. Hari I need to go. Sorry for the brief chanting there, but we'll come back to it next time. Thank you very much. Namaste.